Chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Yoho, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Panelists, I appreciate you being here, and thank you for your service to our great country. Mr. and Mrs. Andrews, thank you for the sacrifice of what you went through. I, as a grateful citizen of this great nation and a member of Congress, am appreciative every day of the liberties and freedoms that we get to experience because of the willingness of people to serve, commit, and dedicate to this country. I thank you. I think we should keep the narrative on the policy. The description of whether or not he was a deserter or not, as you brought up, Specialist Foale, that will come out, and it will go through its due process. Mr. Waltz, you said in your bio, you state that you deal or provide strategic analysis and policy development for other countries. Was the transfer of one American soldier for 5 Taliban a wise decision, in your opinion?
Congressman, I think we should look at this policy as a whole and learn from it. Right now, a gentleman by the name of Mullah Abdul Zakir is the head of the Taliban military committee that we released previously from Guantanamo.
Right.
And we're paying that price now. And further, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS that's terrorizing Syria and Iraq right now, was also detained in Camp Bucca. We need to learn lessons from these releases that we're paying for later.
So in your opinion, it's probably not a wise policy to implement. Dr. Jacobson, you and Mr. Sherman were referring to our democracy, and you brought in Israel as democracies trade for prisoners all the time. And I know I don't need to remind you, but this is not Israel. We're not Israel. We don't do that as a policy. And you're talking about a democracy, and again, I know I don't have to remind you, true democracy is majority rule. It's mob rule. And what I hear of the public want to do with Mr. Bergdahl is mob rule. And I had to remind people, we're a constitutional republic where the minority is protected by rule of law. And as Ben Franklin always talked about, a democracy is 2 wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for lunch. That sheep always loses. And so I'm thankful that we're in a republic, and we need to remind people that we are different because we do follow that. And as far as Mr. Bergdahl, he will come home, and I think anytime we get an American soldier back to our country, we all should celebrate. But I think that before we hang judgment on him, was he wrong or right, we need to look at and let the military go through what they're going to go through to decide the fate of that young man. The issues that I want to ask you about, do we negotiate with terrorists or not? And again, I think Specialist Foale, you brought up, they're terrorists. It's not even a nation. It's a terrorist group. And again, this goes against our precedents. It goes against our historical policy. Do you think this is a wise thing that we do or implement?
Congressman, I certainly think that it's a wise thing that we retrieved Sergeant Bergdahl.
There's no doubt about that. But negotiating with terrorists.
I want to run through just a list of a couple of situations where we have negotiated not only with terrorists but with insurgent groups and with state sponsors of terrorism. As I mentioned, part of bringing the war in Afghanistan to a conclusion will be continued discussions with the Taliban. But taking a look back at our own history, not just discussions that we've had with the North Koreans, we also—
Okay, North Korea, that's a country. It's not a terrorist.
State sponsor of terrorism.
But they're a country.
Was a state sponsor of terrorism.
Okay.
I also look back, as I said, if you understand that there are differences between insurgents, between terrorists, between state sponsors of terrorism, the concern I think people have is this idea of ransom for a hostage. And I look back even at what, and I'm going to give you allies and the U.S., Ronald Reagan, in terms of what happened with the arms for hostages deal, Margaret Thatcher in her secret talks with the IRA. No one would discount that the IRA was a terrorist group. Sometimes you end up sitting across the table from those who have the blood of your friends on their hands to bring peace. And if that is the case that we are seeing, if that's what sitting down with the Taliban means, then I fully support that.
Okay, let me ask you both, Mr. Waltz and Dr. Jacobson, did the President, by not consulting Congress 30 days before, in your opinion, break the law? Mr. Waltz?
Congressman, that's my understanding of the law. I'm not a legal expert, but my understanding of the law was that Congress was to be consulted.
Dr. Jacobson?
Now, I'm not a lawyer, and you're all going to argue about that statute, but I think what the President did, acting on short notice, was absolutely the right thing to do.
I yield back. Thank you.